Well, we've already had reaction on the story in regard to the fact that the Mail on Sunday is reporting the police are... well, it's true because they've covered it up. You can see the photo here in front of me. Police are so cowed by the anti-Semitic mob, they're even covering up a Holocaust memorial. Mary in County Down says the Metropolitan Police is a broken force trusted by no one except anti-Semitic pro-Palestinian protesters who know they can do and say what they want with impunity. That's just one of the attitudes today. Big day politically as well, because Dan Poulter, who is until yesterday a Conservative MP, has defected to Labour. Well, my colleague on Times Radio, Callum MacDonald, actually asked Mr Poulter on the last day of, just almost exactly a month ago, what he was going to do. Will he be standing as a Conservative MP? This is what he told Callum MacDonald on Times Radio.
Well, certainly based on a survey of about 1,500 constituents we've done in my constituency, I would be fairly confident that I would be re-elected if I stood as a Tory MP at the next election.
Did you say if you stood?
Well, yes, if I stand, I've been re-selected to stand as a Conservative. Yes, absolutely.
Understood. Just to clarify, and sorry if I've misheard, will you be standing as a Conservative MP at the next election?
As I said, I've been re-selected to stand, and if you've been re-selected, then your intention is to stand again at an election.
I think he knew what was going on perhaps at that stage. That wasn't the most ringing, not the most straightforward answer that anyone's ever received from a politician. That was Dan Poulter, the former Conservative, now Labour MP, who is now in Labour, crossing the floor tomorrow. Big blow to Rishi Sunak. We'll talk about that with John Rentoul and John McTernan, two Labour experts, in a second. But this is what Dan Poulter, now Labour MP, said to Laura Kuenssberg in an interview with her on the BBC broadcast this morning.
We now have a Tory party that resembles sometimes a little bit more a nationalist or national party rather than a party of the centre-right. And I feel that actually the changes that the Labour Party has made since 2019 under Keir Starmer, not just on the health service, but particularly on that offer on health about tackling the determinants of poor health, housing, poverty, and all those issues, are the sort of things that are really going to make a big difference. And I think that's why I believe that, why I made the change I have and why I believe it will make a difference to the patients I look after.
That is the MP for Central Suffolk and North Ipswich, Dan Poulter, who tomorrow will cross the floor, quite literally moving across the floor from Conservatives to Labour. Two people I would imagine will be quite pleased about that are John Rentoul, who's the chief political commentator at The Independent, and John McTernan, who's a former Labour advisor to a political secretary, actually, to Tony Blair. Both Johns join me now. John McTernan, perhaps your reaction first. This is a good day for Keir Starmer.
It's a good day for Keir Starmer. It's a great day, really, because it shows the way the country is moving, and there's nothing better than a defection of somebody from a safe seat to be an emblem of how Labour has changed and what people are thinking about for the future, looking after the NHS, for example. And I think, defections are very rare because they're a huge thing to do, to move from one political party to another, particularly when you've been elected to be an MP, when you've been a minister. So I think this is a great day. And it caps off a week that some commentators were trying to claim was Rishi Sunak's best week for a while. It ended in tears, which I think the whole of this Parliament is going to end in tears for Rishi.
We're talking about Rishi Sunak's week and the kind of policy decisions that he wants to make a little bit later on in the programme with the Home Office Minister, Chris Philp. But John McTernan, perhaps I could ask you just about the skullduggery behind the scenes. You were perhaps involved, or at least around, working in active politics when Sean Woodward would have defected, presumably, to the Labour Party from the Conservative Party. Perhaps you were involved with that, perhaps you weren't. But when an MP defects, I wonder how long these things take, what sort of inducements are perhaps offered, or whether it's to do with the person. Obviously, you can't speak for Dan Poulter personally, perhaps, but certainly Dan Poulter talking to Laura Kuenssberg, saying that he's obviously very annoyed with the Conservative Party. He is someone who does GP shifts and says that the Conservative Party not running the NHS well in England anyway.
Oh, look, I was involved in one manoeuvre that didn't actually come off. But
go on, John, tell us who it was.
No. You have talked. What happens is that you pick up that someone's discontented, someone's maybe on the move, and you talk to them or their friends. And the thing about this is it's all about relationships. People don't just cross the floor. They have to be assured how they'll be treated if you want to carry on in politics. Labour guarantees safe seats for people who defected, which I think is the gold standard. If you come to us from a safe seat, we'll give you a safe seat if you want one. And that's really annoying to local parties, but what it shows is that the people want to be associated with you. And so around the number, Alan Howarth, Sean Woodward, you saw them turn up in Labour safe seats. You have to give a lot of support. A long time is spent preparing for these things because it's such a psychological rip, and you have to create a group of friends that the person, the MP, knows will be around them, will talk to them, be with them. And it's really the handling that has to wrap itself around the individual, what the concerns are. But you pick it up. More MPs know each other across the political side. They're not as much enemies as colleagues in some places.
Yep.
So you do pick up maybe from select committees. I've heard of conversations that go on the parliamentary skiing trips, and you identify, well, maybe somebody's on the move, or maybe somebody's available, and that's it. Really, I suppose it's very like creating a double agent in espionage. You have to find somebody who's got a grievance, and then you work on the grievance, and then you give them a path to express a way that their concerns in politics can be made emblematic. Dan Poulter is driving the headlines today, which is not a thing he's done in his...
And it's a while, actually, since Dan Poulter has driven the headlines. He's not a particularly high-profile MP. A number of people, John Rentoul, saying that he sort of checked out a little bit, that he wasn't the most well-known or high-profile backbencher on the Conservative benches. Perhaps his heart wasn't in it. Maybe that's part of the reason here, or perhaps the conviction in regard to the NHS is actually part of it. We'll hear from him, of course. But John Rentoul, it's interesting that this has happened. I wonder how much of a blow you think it is to Rishi Sunak and how much of a fillip it is for Keir Starmer.
No, well, it's obviously a blow for Rishi and good for Labour. But I'm surprised at how few defections there have been. I mean, this is only the second. There was Christian Wakeford in 2022, which was a more sort of career-oriented defection, if you like, because he's already got a front bench job in the Labour Party. Christian Wakeford, he's a whip, and he will presumably hold his Bury seat because that's a very marginal seat, but it's now obviously going to go to Labour, and he'll hold it. Whereas Dan Poulter is off. I mean, yeah, he would like a job advising the Labour government, but he's not standing again. So
yeah, and that's the point actually Nick in Rochdale has made on text, where he says, Peter, please can you answer, how is this a defection a great thing when he's standing down at the next election, so won't be standing as a Labour candidate in a general election? Yeah. I mean, is this really that big a deal, John Rentoul?
Well, it's still as John McTernan said, it's still a very important wrench for a politician to change party label. I mean, it's a big psychological thing, and it is a big PR boost for Labour. But I mean, Dan Poulter has been a centrist Tory for a long time, rather mysteriously not a minister since 2015.
Yes, he was in the coalition. Yeah. Yeah,
he was, If you were looking for people to defect, then he would definitely be on the list, along with people like Tobias Ellwood and others that I won't name in case they're about to.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, one person on text as well says, and perhaps I'll put this to John McTernan, did Dan Poulter ever make any positive suggestions about how reforms or efficiencies could be made in the NHS? And as an NHS insider, he could have used his position within the Conservative Party to improve the way that the NHS works. Instead, he just seems to have wanted to throw more money at it. Another person saying that Labour just doesn't have a policy on the NHS. I mean, it does. You may disagree with it, but they do have a policy. But I just wonder, some people will have thought actually reform from within would have been a better idea, John McTernan.
I think when a political party loses an MP in this way, the easy instinct is to attack the individual. The most important thing to do is think about the cause. People don't do this lightly. There is a reason why he's done it. And if the Conservative Party had a policy for the NHS that was clear and was working, they could say, well, he's turned his back on something that's working. But Rishi Sunak's promise was to cut the waiting lists, and just like stopping the votes, that's not happening. And so I think it's, if you're in a political party and this happens to you, hard to do, but you should be wondering, why did this happen? Why have I lost this man? Why is a centrist MP, why is somebody in one of the safest Tory seats in the country decided to make this move? It's not an easy one to do. The quick thing in politics is to want to lash out. The harder thing in politics is to think hard about the meaning, because this question about why he moved is going to be one that you have to think about post an election, which I anticipate will have a Tory defeat. The Tories need to rebuild their support and their base and their membership and their activism and their MPs. That starts with asking, why are people leaving us? And lashing out is the opposite of thinking.
Okay, both Johns, thank you very much indeed. McTurnan and Rentoul sound a bit like sort of Regan and Carter or Starsky and Hutch. Thank you very, very much indeed to both of you. John Rentoul is the chief political commentator, great job title, at The Independent. John McTurnan is a former Labour advisor. He was actually political secretary, very senior advisor to Tony Blair.